The infinite banking concept is really utilizing, as you both know, max or overfunded whole life insurance, where you drive the insurance and the cost of the insurance, by the way, down, and you maximize the cash value. And then the investment optimizer is really teaching the strategy of utilizing that cash. And this isn't for everybody. This is for sophisticated investors that have the discipline to invest in cash flow investments and then put the money back in. But but taking that money, investing it, and then paying yourself back with interest or with the profit.
You're listening to Investing for Good, a show that brings you the stories and strategies of people who are investing to build a legacy for their families, create a meaningful and intentional life by design, and impact the world around them. And now, here are your hosts, Annie Dickerson and Julie Lamb.
Hey everyone, Annie Dickerson here with Julie Lamb. Julie, how are you today?
I'm doing excellent, Annie. How about you? I know you're on the road. This is our first podcast recording with you on the road. How's it going?
It's so great. Oh my gosh, we've been driving through southern Utah, through Zion and Bryce and Capitol Reef, and just seeing those expansive landscapes just sort of puts everything in perspective. You know, when you're at home and in your office all day, you have these problems, these little problems that seem to turn into big problems, right?
Yes.
But when you're out on the road and you see new people, new places, try new foods, even now in the age of coronavirus, that we still see people out and about, we're safe, we've got our masks on and we take all the precautions, but, we're still able to go out and see the world, which I'm so grateful for.
I know. I'm grateful that you're having that opportunity because a lot of people don't. And that's something that, that we're always grateful for is the flexibility and the freedom that, real estate investing allows us. I wake up every morning just so grateful that this is our job, that this is what we get to do. So I have to pinch myself sometimes. So, well, and I'll be joining you next week, on the road as well. And so the next podcast recording, I think that we'll do, we'll both be kind of on the road with our green screen. So looking forward to that.
Well, speaking of freedom and flexibility, that was a big theme of our conversation today with Chris Larsen, founder of Next Level Income. And he's also written a book by the same name. And Chris has had, so many different life experiences. He's been investing in real estate for over 20 years. Since he was 21, I still can't believe it. He was in college and he bought his first property intentionally. Not like he fell into it like most people fall into it, but he intentionally read hundreds of books and then he purposefully got into it. And then his real estate journey has just really taken off.
I know when he had said that he became an accredited investor and met his goal of like $10,000 a month by the time he was 30. I was like, what? Like, I know some people who are still in their like late 40s, early 50s trying to achieve that 10K a month, number. So, and it was so fun to tap him and talk about whole life insurance policies because I think if I'm correct, he's the first guest that we've brought on the show that has talked about not just the life insurance policies and how they're using it, but how they're using it in conjunction with the life insurance policy as a real estate investor. And so it was really good for him to share so much of how he's using the life insurance policies to not only invest in real estate, but also to save for his kids' college education. And we spent a little bit of time talking about that, about how he's used that to replace the 529 plan. And again, freedom and flexibility in that, giving his kids the options to do whatever it is they are going to do when they grow up, which how do you know when their kids are 2, right? And so I love that. He shared a lot of insight in that. And we talked about so many different things, but it was a really great episode.
Yeah, there's so much power when you learn about strategies like this, which is exactly why we've created this podcast and why we love having these conversations. It's our way of giving back to all our listeners and sharing all this wisdom that we've been so privileged to be privy to and to learn these strategies. But when we get to talk to people like Chris, who are out there putting these strategies to work and using them in really unique and creative ways, we learn too. So this is definitely a really fun fun conversation. For all our listeners out there, enjoy this episode with Chris Larsen. Hey, Chris, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great, Annie. It's great to be here with you and Julie. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Absolutely. Now, Chris, I know that you've been investing in and managing real estate for over 20 years. And in that time, you've done so much, everything from rental properties to development to multifamily syndications and even more than that. And we'll definitely dig into all of that. But I want to start by taking us back to the beginning of your real estate journey. Now, I believe you bought your first rental property while still in college at age 21. Is that right?
It is. And it's almost exactly half my life now. I just turned 42. So yeah, we can just rewind halfway and we get right there.
There you go. So tell us how if I think back to my college years, the last thing on my mind was real estate. So tell us how you came to find that property and where were you? What were you thinking about? And how did you decide to pull the trigger on that deal?
Yeah. So I was in college. I was studying engineering, but really what I wanted to do was race bicycles. So I figured I'd get a college degree and go race my bike, become a professional, and then figure out what I really wanted to do. But I was studying engineering because I thought that made sense. It was interesting, but I did not enjoy it, and it wasn't a lot of fun. So I was devoting my energy to racing my bike, doing okay enough in classes. And between my junior and sophomore years, my best friend, my roommate, my training partner died. He had a brain hemorrhage. And it really, for the next year, I poured my heart and soul into racing. And about a year after that, I was doing really well. I was all-American cyclist. I was the president of the cycling team at Virginia Tech. I was winning. I won more races that season than I'd ever won. I was a category 1, which basically allows you to become a professional once you hit that status. But I wasn't happy. And I got back to school and I was trying to figure out really what I wanted to do. And what stuck with me was that I didn't want any regrets, and I wanted to live the fullest life possible, not only for myself, but also to honor the life of my friend Chris, who didn't have his life anymore. And I was interested in investing. I'd already started a Roth IRA, and when I quit cycling, that was kind of where my interest and my focus started to lead. And what I really wanted was freedom. So I wanted freedom to race my bike. And when I wasn't racing my bike anymore, I wanted the freedom to live life on my own terms. So I didn't have to have those regrets. And that's what really drove me into the space. I began day trading. I was making $5,000 a month day trading in college as a junior. I also had a side business, a loft business. So I was doing all right as a college student. But the market was super volatile. It was the late 90s. The NASDAQ was up and down, and you could do really well, but you could also get hurt really badly. And I got hurt in some trades, and I was laying there one morning at 3 a.m. and just thinking, is this I'm 20 years old? What if I'm 40 years old and I'm having these same feelings? I have a family. Is this really what I want to be doing? And I started looking at other options. So I read over 250 books actually on investing, finance, started to look into real estate. And why I gravitated towards it was the control that you had. You could buy a property under value, you could negotiate it, you could even improve it. So I was renting in this little townhouse complex, and one went up for sale. And I was going through a lease negotiation, and there was stuff broken where I was living, and the landlord drug their feet. I saw this place go up for sale, and I had my mom co-sign on the loan, and for $90,000 turned into my first investment property.
Wow. Wait a second. So all of this is happening. You've read 250 books. Most people are like, well, I kind of made a decision. I wanted to go into something. And then 5 years later, then something happened. But you were still 21 when you bought that first property. So was this at age 20, you were like, oh, this day trading thing isn't going to work. And then by 21, you had bought your first property?
So to be fair, it was kind of the process started at 19. Okay. And I read those books over the course of probably about 4 years. And I'll tell you a secret. One of the first books I read was a speed reading course. So do that. If you're going to read a lot of books, either listen to audiobooks at 1.5 times speed or pick up a speed reading book or course. And I was reading 1 to 2 books a week. So, and as you guys know, if you're interested in something, you can really digest material pretty rapidly at that point.
And you had a Roth IRA. What college student has a Roth IRA? You were ahead of your time.
I was fortunate. So I had a friend mentor that we went to church with, and his name's Clint Provenza, and I talk about him in my book. And if what I talk about today resonates with anyone here that's listening, feel free to go to our website, nextlevelincome.com, click on the book link, and I'll send you guys a book for free. But I talk about Clint and how he introduced me to cycling. But during my freshman year, and he went to Virginia Tech as well, he was an engineer, he might have been, computer science. But he gave me this money magazine, and it talked about a Roth IRA, and it talked about kind of the magic of compound interest. And I'll never forget that, logarithmic slope of the investing curve. And I was like, this is it. This makes a lot of sense to me. So yeah, I forget what the limits were back then. It might've been $2,000 or $3,000 that you could put in to start off. And I just started learning about, different investments. And now, I still invest in the stock market. It's funny. My 8-year-old son was just in here with his Roth IRA account. And we were talking about how much his investments have returned this year. So we're trying to use that as a learning tool for them as well.
Nice.
That's amazing. Nice. So you're teaching your son. Did your parents or anybody else teach you about all this stuff while you were growing up?
So they kind of taught by example. And again, I talk about this in the book too. I lost my father at age 5. So my mother and stepfather, they were savers. They weren't huge investors. They weren't big risk takers, but they were savers. And because my stepfather was a contractor and in real estate, they were very comfortable buying and fixing up a property or maintaining it. So he still has, I think, 3 properties that he owns outright. So I got to learn by example. But what I also learned was I don't like to shovel shingles on roofs. I don't like to lay wood floors. I don't like to, take out people's trash for them. I did it. And so I got to learn by doing and by seeing through them. I got little hints here and there. And then once I was in college, I started to learn to reach out to people. And I've had a lot of influence and help along the way for sure. But, enough to get me started from my family.
So you're in college, you try the day trading thing, it's up and down. And that must have been one heck of a realization in your early 20s to think forward to down the road when I have a family. I don't want to feel like this. I think most 20-year-olds, even 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds wouldn't even think about that. They would just think, well, this is fun. I'm enjoying this. I'm learning a lot. I'm making some money some days, losing some money other days. But that is quite an insight to have at such a young age.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Annie. I think you're right. When I kind of look back and I've talked to people about it over the years, you're like, that's not really, that's fairly unique. I think one of the things that kind of changed my mindset was having my father die when I was young. So I always had this thought that time was, it was more finite. So I looked at things probably through a little bit of a different lens. And as I've read about psychology and talked to people, I've heard that this is more common in individuals that have lost a parent or a loved one at a young age. And I think losing my best friend at that point, it really kind of compressed it even more and focused me even more at that point. So I say a lot of times oh, I'm lucky this happened or I'm lucky that happened. I wouldn't wish it. The loss of a loved one on anybody. But it definitely does change your thinking. And I think for me, it's pushed me to do things a little bit differently and be more focused and really try to get the most out of my life. At times when, like you said, other people may be a little more carefree or not really thinking about those things.
Yeah. Let's dig in a little bit to that first deal. So you knew from growing up, you didn't like shoveling shingles, you didn't like swinging a hammer, you didn't like doing all this stuff. But despite that, you had read all these books and you knew that real estate was something you could control, you could improve. When it came time to buy that first deal, what was it about? First of all, what market were you in? Was this in Virginia? Near your school?
Yeah, it was in in Blacksburg, Virginia. Yep.
Okay. Tell us more about the property and what made you decide, I'm going to jump in and try this thing out.
Yeah. So first off, it was kind of a house hack. So I was living there. So I had roommates and I bought the place next door a year or two later. There was 2 3-unit townhomes. So it was kind of like my own little, mini 6-unit apartment building kind of side by side. But I looked at the numbers and I thought, well, geez, I'm paying this much rent. If I buy this place, it was I mean, at the time, FHA loan, it was like $3,000 total with the down payment and the closing cost. Which, I mean, yeah, it's kind of amazing what you can get started in.
Yeah.
And that was about what I would pay well, maybe there was a little bit more than I'd pay a year in rent. I'm trying to think here. Call it the same. So I'm like, wait a minute. If I put this down payment, I get a couple of roommates, I can basically live for free. And interest rates then were about 7%. So even then, I was able to cash flow the property. And I read somewhere like the 1% rule, and all in, you're getting about $900 or $950 rent for a property that you'd pay about $90,000 for. So I knew a little bit of that, but it was very simple. It's like, okay, if I get this cash flow coming in, that's going to eliminate that. And I just remember how excited when my net worth hit $100,000, and I thought, man, if I can get a cash flow of $3,000 a month, I'm golden. This is obviously pre-kids and pre-wife and all that stuff. But yeah, so it was one, the passive income, from the roommates, and then two, the ability to, start to grow the net worth through the appreciation. And that was, real estate really started to rip around that time, kind of late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah. And Julie and I talk about this all the time too, is house hacking is such a great way to get into real estate. That's how we both got started as well, almost by accident, sort of like you were talking about, sort of, you want to get in, it's a good thing to do, but then really thinking about it creatively and being resourceful about it versus, I think what most people do, they, get their degree, they get married, and then they buy a single family home and they live in it for a really long time. But house hacking is such a creative way to get into real estate.
I think it's fantastic. I recommend it. People that are just starting out, it's like, hey, look at that, or buy a home that you can fix up and flip it in a couple of years, take that money tax-free. I think it's like you were saying or alluding to, Annie, it's the opposite of the way most people do it. I was talking to a young investor here in Asheville that I'm mentoring, and she owns 3 properties, but one is a multifamily, one is a multi-unit short-term rental with a lot, and then another is a house. So she has, she's already got a pretty good portfolio, young girl, and she is renting a home. So she owns all these properties and she's renting a home. So I told her, I was like, you're thinking about this the right way. So it's kind of neat. So I advocate that to anybody that's looking to get started. I think it's a great way to think about it. Even if you end up not doing it, at least understanding kind of that mindset will really go a long way for you.
Yeah, it's so funny how that's so hard for people to understand, because it's so ingrained in us to, go out there and buy a house and get a job and just, follow these things. And it's like, this idea of like life is just decided for you already. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to go out there and live my life that the way that somebody else has decided. And it's so hard for people, including myself way back when, like to say, no, I'm not going to do this and to go against the grain and say, I'm going to find another way. Sadly, it usually takes something, at least it did for me, to wake you up to say, oh my goodness, like, what am I doing? I don't have forever. I don't even know if I have tomorrow. And that's the truth. And people don't realize that. And they think they're going to live till they're 90. And it's just not a guarantee. And it's, sometimes, as in your case and mine as well, bad things have to happen in order to wake you up and like give you that jolt you need to realize there's a better way.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, it's fortunate and unfortunate, when you experience these things. And I think that's the thing, you can appreciate the time you have with people and then be grateful for, maybe the lesson that's been learned.
Yeah. So, okay. So I know you've done a ton of other stuff besides this one little rental property. So I want to move on from that and spend some time kind of talking about all these other things that you've gotten into. So take us post the townhome, and then you said you bought the second one next door a year or two later. Yep. What happened after that? You must have known at that point, as did I. You do one, you're like, wow, this is working out pretty good. Like this is, if I could do more of this would be a good thing, right? So then you buy the second one, and then what did you do after that? Because I know you've done a lot in the last 20 years. So what happened after that?
Kept buying. So my initial strategy, I read this book. It's called Buy and Hold.
Okay.
And he's actually I don't know if he's still alive anymore. He's an older investor in California. And he basically just talked about how powerful it is in real estate to buy, utilize leverage, and have somebody else pay your mortgages off.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, I didn't, that $3,000 was about all I had at the time. I mean, I did have some money in the stock market. So, but it's like, all right, how am I going to buy multiple properties? So the next property, it was like maybe $10,000 down. The one after that was 30. So when you're 20, 22, 23 years old, it doesn't take that long to run out of money and down payment. So
yeah,
I quickly realized, one, I needed a plan, and I'm a planner. I'm very strategic in everything I do. And then I needed capital for down payment. So I thought, okay, my plan is to buy enough properties to have $10,000 a month coming in. So I thought, all right, if I can do this in 5 years, I'll be good. So buy, 1-2 properties a year. I got to the point by the time I was 25 and I had enough properties that I had $10,000 a month in rent coming in gross.
Wow.
Well, I mean, I say gross, that's, that would be net expenses, not including debt service.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, now if I have a good job, I can just pay these off. And that was my initial plan. And I ended up in the medical device industry. Just the same thing we do right now. Again, I talk about this in my book, how I've always followed demographics. I'm really a demographics guy. I'm an investor and a demographics person. And I use demographics to shape my investing decisions, which is what led me to multifamily. It also led me to the medical device industry in 2002, when I made the choice to go into it. It's what led me to Asheville, North Carolina. And I think it's also the same thing that we're seeing. The current pandemic with the COVID-19 crisis is accelerating these trends. These were all happening 20 years ago, and I have it documented. So this isn't some magic thing that people are now all of a sudden moving from the city to higher quality areas. So I thought, okay, now I got a job. I can pay all these properties off in 5 to 10 years if I make some good money. I started down that process, put my head down, and by the age of 30, I was accredited. I was making good money. We had my wife was pregnant, had our first son. And that I was like, all right, I got like 5-ish years to make this happen. And my goal was before 40. So I figured, 35 to 40, I was right on track. My mother passed away, got cancer, passed away a week before my second son was born. And at that point it was like, all right, what the hell's happening? I was 33 or 34 at the time. And I thought, okay, let's reassess. And one of the things my wife and I did, we reassessed our financial picture, and we looked at our portfolio. And when I started with these properties in the early 2000s, I was getting about a 30% return on my equity that I had in them. By the time I was in my early 30s, 10 years later, I was getting a 7% return. And after tax, as you know, if you're making, a few $100,000s a year after tax, I was getting about a 4 to 5% post-tax return. And I was like, this is terrible. Somebody at a meeting mentioned multifamily. I started looking into it, and I was like, wow, these demographics, the same thing I saw with the baby boomers, the millennials, are driving this rental market. So I started looking to multifamily, talked to some operators. Over the next few years, I sold all my single family properties and rolled them all into multifamily. And we have been 100% in multifamily, a little bit of commercial since 2015.
Wow. And did you guys roll it all in as passive investors or active, like you were buying your own apartments?
So starting in 2013, from 2013 to 2016, well, 2015, 2016, but from 2013, 2014, part of 2015, passive. Starting in 2015, it was a combination of active, and then we syndicated our first deal with my previous partner in 2016. So every deal since then, I have been on both sides as an LP as well as a GP.
We'll get back to our conversation with Chris in just a minute.
Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but aren't sure you have the time or the desire to manage the investment? Perhaps you're afraid, like we were, that you'll make the mistake of choosing the wrong market or the wrong team and lose your entire investment. Well, that's exactly why we created the Goodegg Investor Club. We do the work of identifying solid real estate investment opportunities in the best markets around the country and then partner with you to acquire these investments, and then we'll all share in the returns. We'll identify the growing markets, strong, experienced teams, and the solid deals. We do all the heavy lifting of managing the tenants and the renovations, and as a passive partner, you get to enjoy all the benefits of investing in real estate, monthly cash flow, long-term appreciation, and the ongoing tax benefits. When we first discovered passive investing through real estate syndications, we realized it fit perfectly into our busy lives. We could put our money to work for our families, work less, and get more time back in our days so that we could focus on what matters most and discover our true passion and purpose in life. We've now helped hundreds of people invest passively in real estate syndications and are seeing the positive impact it's had on their lives. We invite you to partner with us by joining the Goodegg Investor Club today so you can start putting your money to work for you and get more time back in your day, because we know that when people have more time in their days, they can do the true work they were intended to do, and the world will be a better place. To sign up for the Goodegg Investor Club, go to goodegginvestments.com/invest and we'll take it from there. That's goodegginvestments.com/invest.
And now, back to our chat with Chris Larsen.
So you started out as a passive. So tell us about that, because I know a lot of people, always ask, like, is that a good way to get into it? Is it, how should I go about this? I think I want to be active. And that's something that I always recommend, that if you think you want to be active, before you go and start messing around with other people's money and syndicate a deal, or even your own money. I mean, who wants to put in, $2-3 million of your own money into a deal you don't know what you're doing?
Right.
But, so tell us about that decision-making process. Like, how did you decide like passive was the way versus active?
Yeah, so I think I agree 100%, Julie. And you made a nice comment there. You never want to mess around with other people's money. You want to make sure. And look, if you're a passive investor and you're talking to syndicators, you want to make sure they got their own money in the deal too. Like that's the first thing you want to make sure of. Before you start you start being critical of their experience and all that. So I think it's awesome. And this is what I tell investors. If they call me and they say, hey, I'm interested in doing this, I said, great. How are you going to learn? It's a fabulous way to learn, because if you are in a syndication, if you're an LP in the deal, you're still an owner in the deal. You can learn as much as you need. And, but before you do that, you really got to assess, like, what do you enjoy? Like, do you enjoy doing that? Do you enjoy talking to investors? Do you enjoy doing your own repairs? Do you enjoy talking to banks? Like, what is it that you really enjoy? And as a passive investor, you can start to figure out how to analyze deals, how to vet operators, and also you can determine what it is that you like about the different aspects. And what I found is I can operate a deal just fine. I can look through all that, but I really, right before we got on this call, I still got the spreadsheet pulled up. We're underwriting a deal. I love looking at spreadsheets, underwriting deals, tweaking the numbers. I love educating investors, and those are the things that if I didn't have anything to do, I would get up and that's what I would do. I'd read data. I would look at spreadsheets and I would talk to people.
You didn't say that on the first date with your wife, did you? Or is that how you got her in?
I usually save that. That's like a third or fourth date kind of thing.
Got it. Okay, right. Yeah. That sounds
now
like
after the sousaphone conversation.
That's right. Now, back in band camp, you can start talking about spreadsheets the first date. But now we actually met in yoga class. No spreadsheets talk.
No spreadsheet talk, yeah. I want to come back to the multifamily thing, but I know you've done a lot of other things as well. Yeah. And I know you do the infinite banking thing as well, right? And so I want to hear a little bit about that from your perspective, because Annie and I are huge fans of it. It's something that we, put into our financial plan as well. And when I first discovered it, I was like, this can't be real. This really, literally cannot be real. And the funny thing is, back almost 4 years ago when I first discovered it, I read it somewhere on Bigger Pockets, like in a blog, and then I couldn't find it anywhere else. It was very hard to find anybody who was talking about how they're using it in conjunction with their real estate investments. And so it took me a while. And even still, Annie and I talk about this. It's not something we get it, but when we try to explain it to other people, very hard for us. So can you just real briefly run through what it means and how you might be using it, or how you might advise somebody to implement that into their investing strategy?
Absolutely. So I sold life insurance for State Farm when I was finishing my MBA. And what I was taught back then was buy term, invest the difference. And if you're investing in the stock market, you're like, yeah, it's great. If I'm getting a 20% return in the stock market in the 90s, like, why would I put my money anywhere else? Infinite banking is not an investment. So if anybody's listening and is like, oh yeah, I've heard about that, like I can invest my money other places, don't think of it like that. It's a tool. It's a storehouse of wealth. It's a place to, keep your money safe. And I talk about the 3 buckets in my book. I talk about, how the second bucket is your safety bucket. Like or your protect bucket. You need to protect your life, your possessions, and also, the money that you have, for investing. So I learned about this concept back in 2009. And same thing as you, I heard about this concept. It's like, all right, let me look into it. I was like, this is almost too good to be true. I can use this. And we really initially set the policies up, Julie, as a strategy in lieu of a 529 plan. So my wife and I started these policies, and just like if your audience hasn't figured it out now, I started to dig deeper. I thought, oh, okay, like I have this cash value in these policies. And what I would do is I would put in a certain amount every month. And then when I get bonuses, I put my bonuses in there as well. And then we take the money out, we buy a car, we pay ourselves back. And that's kind of like this, if people have heard like the bank on yourself strategy and infinite banking, and Nelson Nash talks about this in his book, Becoming Your Own Banker. I keep reading, and I read about somebody who was building homes, was a builder, and he would take the money out, build a house, take the profit and roll it back in and do it all over again. That makes a lot of sense. So I called my agent. I said, hey, Russ, I said, what do you think about this? He goes, I think it's a great idea. It's like, okay. So my wife and I started building spec homes. We took the capital out of our policies. And then what we did was we recycled the capital back in, plus a little profit that we paid ourselves with interest. And we take the big piece of the profit and we put that into our next multifamily deal. We started doing that in 2012, 2013, right around the same time. Took me 10 years though. And again, the point, I hate to be kind of morbid here, but these moments had big impacts in my life. My best friend's wife passed away from cancer. He calls me and says, man, I can't thank you enough, Chris, about telling me about this, the life insurance. And he called his agent and started basically an infinite banking policy for his wife and himself. It allowed him to quit his job, move back to Asheville where he's from. And for a year, that's all he did was spend time with his daughters. And then people started to ask me, well, where do you get your money for these deals? I said, I take it out of my life insurance policies. So well, how do you do that? And I thought, well, this is all right. I thought, all right, this is, I need to put together a tool to teach people about that. So we just introduced that this year on our website as well. We call it the investment optimizer. And really what that is making sure you have the specially structured contract, because it's a contract with the life insurance company. And then we talk about how to utilize the cash value in those policies, that capital that's yours as collateral, and then borrow against that to put in the deals. And basically what you do is it's financial arbitrage. So the infinite banking concept is really utilizing, as you both know, max or overfunded whole life insurance, where you drive the insurance and the cost of the insurance, by the way, down, and you maximize the cash value. And then the investment optimizer is really teaching the strategy of utilizing that cash. And this isn't for everybody. This is for sophisticated investors that have the discipline to invest in cash flow investments and then put the money back in. But but taking that money, investing it, and then paying yourself back with interest or with the profit as well. And we lay that all out. It's a 5 or 10 page paper or white paper that anybody can get at our banking link is what it's under.
And so that's so cool. So you did spec homes. and you're taking all of the big chunk of the profit and putting it into multifamily deals. So you maxed out the policy premiums and the life insurance, and then you had all this extra money, and it's like, okay, well, where else can I put this? Where it's going to work the hardest for me? And then you put it into the multifamily deals. Was that as an active investor, or was it as a passive?
We were kind of combining it at that point.
Okay.
So it started as passive. Yeah. So just, for your listeners, let's say you have $100,000 that you've built up over, say 5 years in an insurance policy. We take $50,000 to $100,000 out. We would use that to fund either the down payment or the purchase of a lot that we use as collateral for a spec house. We would typically get somewhere around a 50% return. And so if you invest $100,000, that's a $50,000 return. We'd pay ourselves back, and we'd take that, $40,000 or $45,000 net, and we'd put that into the next deal along with, another, say, $50,000 that we had accumulated as well. And we were able to, that just allowed us to invest more and more, faster and faster.
Do you recommend, if somebody has some money laying around right now, $50,000, $100,000, and they want to invest in multifamily as a passive investor, they don't have a whole life insurance policy, but this sounds interesting to them, how would they go about, what would kind of the first steps be to implement this plan to kind of maximize that investment?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Julie. I think, it's not necessarily for everybody, and I talk about, I call it my opportunity fund in the book. And I say, well, what is this? Like, what is it for? Who is it not for? If you don't need or want permanent insurance, maybe it's not for you. You could just stick your money somewhere else. But if you have a family, if you have a need for insurance and you're disciplined and you can do it, yes, you could take, like, say, $100,000 that's in savings and funnel it through an insurance policy. There's going to be an upfront cost to that because you're paying for that insurance, and all the costs are very transparent in insurance. But over the life of a policy, you're typically looking at a cost of less than 1% over the life of that policy in fees. So yeah, you could absolutely do that. And a good policy that's structured well is going to give you 70 to 80% year one of the money that you put in it. And typically these policies are going to break even about year 5. And after that, that money's going to grow really unencumbered. So you're looking at, every dollar that you put in, you're going to have more than that typically by year 5 going forward. And certainly faster if you invest that and accelerate that process.
Wow.
So I'm sure there's people listening who are hearing about this for the first time, or maybe understanding this for the first time. Maybe they've heard the term infinite banking before, but really didn't know what it meant. So I want to make sure that everybody who's listening to this understands that, when you take your money from savings and you put it into a whole life insurance policy, it's not like that money just disappears. I think that's the misconception that a lot of people have, is like, I'm buying this policy, so this $100,000 just goes away and I don't have it anymore. But in fact, it's quite the opposite. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that's a great way. We say it's a way to put your money to work in 2 places at once. So you can put it to work in a policy, and typically, historically, these policies have returned about a 5% return. Now, I said early on, don't consider it an investment, but you do get a rate of return. Think of it like a supercharged savings account. So you're getting that return, you're getting the value of the life insurance, because if you would never ask my friend what the return on his wife's policy is, but it's near infinite because there's that value of that life insurance, and then you can take that cash value out and invest it somewhere else. Now you're going to pay interest. You're going to pay a small interest fee on that, but you're going to get dividends, and your typical net interest is like 2 to 3%. So it's like a really low cost mortgage. And if you're getting, double-digit returns in real estate, and if you're not getting double-digit returns in real estate, talk to Julie and Annie. I'm sure they can point you in the right direction. Or go in bigger pockets. There's a lot of ways you can do that. But if you can get money at 2 to 3% and invest it at 10+%, to me, that's a no-brainer, and have that value. And then here's the question I ask investors. I'd say, like, Annie, Julie, what are you doing with your money in between deals? Are you sticking it in a checking or savings account? That money's just sitting there. It's basically rotting, right? It's getting eaten away by interest and fees and everything. Why not put it to work? And then when that investment pays off, if you don't have another place to put that money, you can put it back into your insurance policy until you have a place to put it. It's going to be safe. It's going to be protected from creditors,
Mhm.
and it's going to be available, in times like I called my insurance company 3 months ago when the coronavirus broke out, and I pulled a significant amount of liquidity out and set it aside in case we needed it. So it's,
Mhm.
I just think it's a tremendous tool. And again, it is that it's definitely a tool to be used versus, just a straight investment. Although some people think of it like that too.
You mentioned that you were setting this up in lieu of a 529 plan. How? I mean, I'm sure there's people thinking, what do you mean? Because, and it's funny because when I first started talking to folks about this, I'd see on, Facebook, different people talking about, oh, what 529 plan should I do? What state should I open it in? All these things. I'm like, forget the 529 plan. There's all these other options. So talk a little bit about that. Like, what does that mean? Because a lot of our audience are families and people who have young kids. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So again, it's, I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not going to tell, any of your listeners, you should do this or you shouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
But there are restrictions with 529 plans.
Mm-hmm.
Has to be used for qualified educational expenses. Sometimes it limits the aid that a student gets. And you may be limited with the investments that you can choose with the 529 plan. So those are all things. Just like if you have a 401k, I'm not saying 401ks are bad, especially if you're getting a match, that might be a good idea, but you're limited and it has some restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
What we did, I'll just talk about our situation. Mm-hmm. We said, okay, I put together a blog so you can go on. It talks about, I have 2 parts. I have how to pay for college without a 529 plan with real estate, part 1, and how to pay for college without a 529 plan, part 2, which is using life insurance. So I walk through this. So if unfortunately, these might be some uncomfortable numbers, but if you have a child today, I have 2 young boys, chances are in 15 plus years, you're going to pay about $200,000 a year or $200,000 for a college education.
Yeah.
So if you say, okay, $200,000, I'm going to grab my Texas Instruments calculator here, and it, say
they still make those.
Well, here's this is pretty cool. It's an app on the phone now. Can everybody see that?
Oh, look at
that. So I got my BA 2 plus professional on the phone. I love it. So, if you need $200,000 at 18 years in the future, I'll just do this in real time for everybody. Mm-hmm. And you start off at 0, mm-hmm. and you're going to, let's say you can afford to put in, $500 a month. Mm-hmm. That interest rate you need, here we go, is going to be, you need about a 6.3% interest rate. So mm-hmm. you need to save about $500 a month, or you got to get a really high, mm-hmm. Thing. So I thought, okay, if I can save $500 a month and put it in a life insurance policy, here's the thing. If you put in a 529 plan, mm-hmm. let's say you end up with $200,000, you take all that $200,000 out. What are you left with at the end? You're left with mm-hmm. Paid for college education, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you put in an insurance policy, you start off with the $200,000. By the way, you can use that the whole time to buy cars, to finance real estate projects that you can use to have a bigger rate of return. Can't do that with a 529 plan. Let's say something happens and a parent loses their job. Let's say your son or daughter decides not to go to college, or they get a scholarship, or they're a professional athlete. And I have friends who they've said this. They're like, well, my son is doing this and he doesn't need the money. Well, you can use it for that. Let's say your daughter gets a scholarship. You can now use the money to pay for her wedding or whatever else, or down payment for a house. So there's that. But then here's the thing. You can borrow that money out, and then your son or daughter or yourself, you can pay that money back in or not pay that money back. That's the other secret, over time. And now that money can be used over and over and over again. Now it takes a little discipline. It takes, you may put that money back in there over a period of time, but now you can use it for a down payment for a car. You can use it to teach your children and say, well, listen, I'm going to give you the money for your college education instead of a student loan, but you're still going to have to pay it back like a student loan. And that's our plan with our kids. Like, they're going to have that money to be able to use, but it's just not there and gone away. They're going to have to put that money back, but then they're going to have the benefit of it for, whatever it is, buying a car, buying a house, buying their first investment property, starting their own business. And that's the thing. If you look at people like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, they came from family of means, and they had the flexibility to be able to do that. So my goal is to give my children, the ability to get an education, but also the education, the financial education, and then, the resources if they decide to do something else. Obviously, I believe in it, and that's kind of my thoughts if somebody's considering the two.
Yeah. And the one key word I kept hearing over and over is flexibility. Flexibility. Yeah. And that is something that
freedom, right? That's what we all want.
Totally. Yep. And it's a recurring theme with so many of our guests, and leads us really nicely into our Investing for Good impact round, which where we're going to ask you 3 questions around investing for good and what it means to you. Awesome. And I assume that the answer to the first question is going to be related to the flexibility, but I'll ask you and see what you have to say. So the first question is around investing in yourself. So what is one way that your investments are helping you to live a better life?
Yeah, I think something I maybe not wouldn't necessarily come to mind, but when I was a sales rep, I was a medical sales rep. I had this passive income coming in, and we had a big negotiation, and all the different companies were trying to vie for this $6 million a year contract. It was a 3-year, $6 million contract. I bet 100%. All the other companies, the representatives, they didn't go all in because they were scared to death of losing their job and their income. And what happened was, the fact that I wasn't scared, that I had the ability to bet 100% and take that risk, we actually got it. And those reps that weren't able to take that risk or didn't want to take that risk, they ended up losing their income. So that made a big difference. I think it's allowed me, like you said, Julie, the flexibility to do what I want in my personal and professional life. And I think that's what we talk about. It's what you all talk about. You're free to pursue your passions. I think it makes everyone a better person when you have the ability to do that.
And I feel like it also gives people so much more confidence to take on maybe a little bit more risk in doing things like leaving your job or spending 2 months on vacation, or, doing things that you otherwise wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable doing, because you have these different streams of passive income coming in. And it, if something happens to you, or, you couldn't work or whatever, you still have money coming in. And so it allows you that flexibility, and therefore your confidence, right? To be able to take on a little bit more risk with certain things in your life. So I love that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Second question is investing in others. So what is one investing hack or investing strategy that you might be able to share with the audience that will help them catapult their investing journey?
Yeah. So I think, finding a mentor is critical, and you can use, if you don't know where to look, you can start by listening to podcasts, but that's why I wrote the book. That's why we have the podcast and the blog now, because I don't, so many people make mistakes. I had to kind of fumble my way through, and it took me 10 years or 8 years to figure out how to really maximize the use of, the life insurance policies. That's not necessary. So educate yourself. If you don't have a mentor, find somebody who emulates what you want your life to look like and reach out to them. And if they're not able to do it, they'll probably be able to point you to the right resources. So I would say, first and foremost, find a mentor, and do not be afraid to reach out to people that you respect and you would like to either emulate or have achieved the success that you want to be or have.
Yeah. Annie and I are huge believers of mentors and coaches. We would not be as close to where we are without having those folks on our team and, guiding us. And it's like, why reinvent the wheel, So go talk to somebody who's doing it and just get the roadmaps so you know how to do it.
Exactly.
Okay. Last question is investing in the world. So what is one way that your investments are helping to make the world a better place?
Yeah. So 2 things. One of the organizations here locally that we really like and respect is called Open Doors of Asheville. And their mission is to basically shrink the education gap for those in poverty. Education and I would say financial education is so critical when it comes to, moving up in this world, getting a good education. If you have a good education, you're probably going to make more money. If you have more money, you can afford better food. You're going to have better health. That means you're going to live longer. If you live longer, you have time to compound interest and invest more that you can pass on to your family and turn into generational wealth. So we donate to Open Doors of Asheville, but I'm also working with them to put together a financial education path to help educate these individuals, not just in school, but also in finance, and help them along that path. And it's something I'm very passionate about.
Love that. And it's something that Annie and I are super passionate about as well. And something that we feel is just lacking right now in the educational system. And you have to ask yourself why. And when, there's folks like you out there who are, helping the young folks understand all of this at a much younger age than we all were. We were adults, when we learned all of this stuff. And I think it'll just help to make the world a better place as our children, move into adulthood. So I love all of that.
All right. Well, Chris, man, we've covered so much ground in such a short time. You've got your white paper, your book, your blog posts about 529 plans, the infinite banking concept. There's so much more we could talk about. But for the listeners out there who really connected with this conversation, what's the best place for them to go to learn more and perhaps get a copy of your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So anybody listening today, if this resonated with you, you can get a free copy of our book. Go to nextlevelincome.com, click on the book link. You can put your address in. I'll send you a free copy of the book. You can also download an ebook there. If you are interested in learning more about what we call the investment optimizer approach and how to use that, whether it's with your current policies or whether you want to you want to decide if this is something that you want to do, go to the banking link, and then you can find the articles on the 529 plans at our blog link. So just hunt around our website, you'll find all that, and you can always reach out to me, Chris@nextlevelincome.com, if you have any more questions.
Chris Larsen, founder of Next Level Income and author of the book, Next Level Income. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today, Chris.
Thanks for the opportunity, Chris. Annie, Julie, it's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to Investing for Good, the #1 podcast for people like you who are investing to build a legacy for their families, create a meaningful and intentional life by design, and impact the world around them. For more resources, check out goodegginvestments.com/podcast and be sure to join the Investing for Good Facebook community. And don't forget to subscribe and give us a 5-star review so we can continue to bring you amazing new conversations every week. Until next time, keep investing for good.